Cosmo Tank is a neat little Game Boy game that I don't think too many people have ever heard of. I mean, case in point, before I saw the option to add this game to my cart for $1 extra, I had never heard of this game. And because this game cost me so little, I really didn't have high hopes for it. And I gotta say, those very low hopes were immediately dashed because this game is awesome. So, Cosmo Tank is a game about going to several different planets and destroying giant monsters within. This game isn't entirely clear why, although this guy seems to point his finger at some sort of mad professor and his ultimate creation, Mega Man Battle Network 6 Cybeast Gregor, for reasons. So, sure. But the point is, top-down tank rolling around shooting things in the face adventure. You use your A button to shoot your blaster, your B button to drop bombs if you have them, to screen clear, as well as destroy obstacles in front of you. It all works well. Things get a little bit more interesting, however, once you find a cave, because these caves hold the giant boss monsters. But more importantly, once you enter these caves, suddenly it's a first-person tank adventure. Yeah, I don't know either, but when I first saw this, I was pretty floored because I just thought, hey, this is just a basic fun tank arcadey shooting thing. Nope, it's also a first-person adventure RPG. So in these caves, you'll run around occasionally fighting random encounters, and while navigating these caves, you can find giant towers which will attack you, but will give you map data for the tunnel if you manage to beat them. You'll find these weird other towers which seem to be siphoning energy from the planet to feed the boss monster. I think, maybe. And then you'll also find boss monsters, which typically have way too much health, but I think that's also reduced by destroying all the things that are feeding it energy. Again, maybe. This game isn't super clear on it. I'm guessing that was all explained in the manual, which I don't have. But it is an awesome change of pace from the top-down adventure, and the nice thing is it manages to maintain pretty much all of the same constant things as the top-down elements, such as your blaster still working with your A, your bombs still working with your B. While you can't use your bombs to screen clear enemies, they basically give you an easy out for damaging opponents, and honestly the transition works excellently. The only thing about the first-person segments I don't really enjoy is your hitbox isn't entirely clear to you. Like, enemies can't hit you if they're behind you, and if they're on screen they might not necessarily be able to hit you, but if their attack enters like the middle third of the screen, then you get hit. But it's sort of nebulous as to where the edges of that hitbox are. And that gets frustrating on some bosses, because then it devolves down to sort of strafing between shots to get a shot in. But as I said, the only thing about the first-person segments that is really wholly not good is that bosses have way too much health. And even then, while it might be modifiable by damaging the life siphoner things, by the time you get to the third planet, you get a hypercharged Mega Buster for your tank, so that kind of evens things out a little bit. And even if it doesn't, before that, your lasers actually level up, as does the rest of your tank. Because again, this game's also kind of an RPG. So yeah, if you blow up enough enemies, you'll also gain experience. Gain enough experience, you gain an extra life point. Permanently, which is great. And for every 10 laser power-ups you get, your laser will power up even further. Unfortunately, unlike the tank life power-ups, every time you die, your laser reverts back to level 1, which is a little bit annoying, especially when you're right outside the boss gate, or die on the boss. But despite this being an RPG, while you can grind and get experience, it's not really super recommended that you do. Because if you grind enemies, as you can see, by doing so the enemies change a little bit, right? Well, eventually they just start sending wave after wave of mini-bosses at you, and it doesn't work all that well after that. So you have been warned. There's other power-ups you can get which help you navigate your terrain as well, such as shields and hovering abilities, which are necessary to go down further planets. So exploration is key if you want to do well in this game. Oh, but that's not all, because, that's right, there's in fact a third mode of play. Top-down, vertical scrolling, shmup mode. Seriously, I don't know who thought to combine all these different game ideas, but for such a little game, it feels like the developers were trying to cram as much game into it as possible. And the nice thing is they work well and they have a constant of mechanics, so it's not like any of them feel out of place or underdeveloped. Basically, the gameplay in this game kicks ass. Now the overall presentation of Cosmo Tank is pretty stylish. I think visibly it's not that exciting, at least from the top-down perspective. First-person perspective, however, the monsters are highly detailed and the bosses are really cool. Top-down, it's just kind of average-looking. There's a ton of different enemies though, and I can really respect that. I just wish there was as much detail as there was in the first-person segments. Audio-wise, the soundtrack is really solid. However, there are a couple issues with it. While the individual songs themselves are fantastic, they are very short and they do loop. So unless you're a big fan of them, they will probably drive you up the wall, which is a little unfortunate. And likewise, there's not a lot of different songs. For example, every planet's overworld has the exact same song. Every vertical scrolling shmup segment has the exact same song. There are 2 different songs for tunnels. I think one is to delineate whether the tunnel has a boss in it or not. But unless you really, really like the music, and to its credit, it's really good music, it's probably going to get dull rather quickly. Which is unfortunate because it is a pretty high quality product for what it is. Now, if you'd like to get your hands on a copy of Cosmo Tank, well, good news, because this game is dirt cheap and easy as hell to find, so I have no idea why I'd never heard of this game before, nor have I ever seen anyone talk about this game before. Seriously, grab this game, it's awesome. And while it might not be the most well-made game out of all the Game Boy games out there, it feels like the developers were trying to cram as much innovation and content into this game as they possibly could, and I think that the end result is a fantastic game, and I can say that with full confidence because despite the fact that I had such an initial low opinion of Cosmo Tank just based on its initial low price, this game absolutely blew me away.